Hello, and welcome to another edition, another episode, another version of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. Guys, those of you that are listening, you've been listening to this for some time. I mean, we're well over 100 episodes now. And the guest that I've got on the show today, Bob Priest-Heck, I wanted to talk to him specifically, and I wanted to bring him on the show very specifically because what his company Freeman does is something that all of us that are listening have experienced in one way or another, and that's an event, an experience. And Freeman is one of the world's leading event producers, and Bob is the CEO and is a board member of Freeman. Freeman's over 95 years old. They've been around a long time. And part of what I wanted to talk about is, as we're coming out of the pandemic, and we're not there yet, but as we're coming out of it, we all had the experience of being locked down. And as an event company, as an event provider, there was some real interesting dynamics in play, for your organization and just for the industry as a whole. And I put myself on the user side of that equation. Because 90%, 95% of my book of business was event oriented in some way, shape, or form. So I want to just welcome Bob Priest-Heck, and we're going to have I think a fascinating conversation. So kind of strap yourself into the seat here, and we'll see where we end up going. So Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here.
Let's, I'll just start with a typical question that I'll ask a guest here, and I kind of set you up for this preamble before we started recording. But when you hear the term "the soul of business," what does that bring up? And I'm specifically interested in it from a couple of perspectives. Number one, obviously, is your orientation around it, but also as an event producer, how does the event medium lend itself to showcasing the soul of a business?
Oh yeah. Wow. That's a good setup for me. Thank you, Blaine. So for me, when I hear that, why I was interested in being on the show was, to me, it's the heartbeat of an organization. When I think about, what really drives, what really makes something hum. And for Freeman being a 95-year-old company, there's a lot of very deep values here. And, a lot of companies have marketing and HR write down the values, and then they try to teach the employees, hey, these are our values. But at Freeman, it was really done differently. At some point, someone said, you know what, we should write down what we stand for. What are our values? What do we do? How do we do it? And so it's very much in the fabric of the company. And to be honest, I like to say that people are the next killer app. And this is a company full of amazing, amazing people. And sometimes people say, well, why is Freeman so successful? There's lots of competitors. It's our people. It really comes down to our people. So when I think about the soul of our company, I immediately think about what's the real heartbeat, and it's our people. It's the team. And that is our secret sauce. But I love the part two to your question, because this is really why I think events are so critical to really business. And we lost about 95% of our revenue overnight. We're private, so I don't share numbers, but think multiple billions down to hundreds of thousands overnight. And it was very traumatic, as you can imagine. But what we quickly learned is, hey, we're impacting kind of global commerce. These events are where people trade. It's where they go to learn. It's where they go to innovate. It's where they go to network. Some things were okay online, education, very topical things. You're seeing corporate customers still use virtual very successfully because they've always been looking for that solution. I've been doing this for a long time. We talked about omni-channel marketing in the 90s, and the best we ever got in most cases was multi-channel. But the pandemic kind of enabled a different approach, and I think you're seeing that used successfully. But even the most successful folks who've done things online want to be back together face to face. And for me, I think when you bring people together with a common purpose. So I don't care if it's soccer coaches, if it's heart doctors, if it's technology executives, if it's pick something. They really, and they have a five senses experience with events that you can't really have in any other medium. They really do their best work, and they really come together, and they're really happy. And we've been through a lot as a society, and I recently wrote an article that really kind of describes what I call the pressure stack of what everyone's been through. And I picked the last 22 years randomly. I just picked since the year 2000, and I looked at what we've been dealing with as a society, both with social issues, with political issues, with technology issues. And it's not bad or good. Some bad, some's good, some's in between. But the rate of change and the amount that we're asking people to process, and really kind of the divisiveness that has been driven out of this period. I linked to the Edelman Trust Barometer. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Edelman Trust Barometer.
Very familiar with Edelman.
Yeah, I've looked at it for years, and I linked kind of where we are in trust. And so I go back to what we learned in the most recent Trust Barometer from Edelman, and it was a consistent decline in trust in media, trust in government, and an increase responsibility for corporate leaders, for business leaders, because people, they want to work for a purpose-driven company. They want to understand that the company is going to stand up for things that are important to them. And they want to make sure that at the end of the day, they have a trusted source. And so, again, I go back to the soul of the business. I think it's changing a little bit, because I think people, as corporate leaders, we have a new set of responsibilities that, many of us weren't taught. In fact, we were taught quite the opposite, which is, hey, that's not for work. That's personal. We don't talk about politics, religion, things like that. But it's getting harder to balance that. So I'll end on this point with the pressure stack to say, I think events play an important role in rebuilding trust as well. Because again, when we all come together, we leave some of that bias, some of those personal views at the door, and we just say, hey, we're going to work on diabetes today and solving and making a cure. We're going to work on developing a new technology where, you really come at it from a much more open place when you're together.
Yeah, absolutely. There's about 14 different, I made some notes as you were talking about 14 different things I want to touch on here. The five sense experience.
Yeah.
So a virtual environment doesn't, obviously lend itself to a full five sense experience. There's a notion that I have about all that any organization is a collection of individuals that are in relationship. And to the degree that the relationships are working well, you got a pretty good shot at being successful as a company. Now, the first blush understanding of that is, well, it's the interpersonal relationships. There's also relationship with values, vision, work process. There's relationship with the chair that I'm sitting in, the chair that you're sitting in.
Yes.
And you mentioned the rate of change, and this is one of the points that I wanted to just kind of unbundle here a little bit. It is accelerating. There's no question about that. And because all an organization is a collection of folks in relationship, they have a relationship, like I said, with just about anything and everything that an organization's about. The problem that I can tell, or my take on this is the problem with change isn't the change itself. The problem with change is the disruption to existing relationships that the change causes.
Yes.
And it's that disruption to relationship that gets to be problematic. And that's where we, and when those relationships are perturbed, are broken, that's, symptomatically, we're going to see breakdowns in trust or reporting of I don't trust. So those sorts of things. So that as kind of a preface, Freeman brings something to the table that I think is unique. And I say unique in the sense that you are, just extraordinarily competent in doing what you do with this. How are you able to, through the use of the medium of event, reestablish connection, reestablish trust, not just the interpersonal five sense trust, but the trust that people have with a company that's actually hosting, sponsoring, both hosting and sponsoring an event? How does that come into play for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And we just had our leadership conference last week. So we had about a couple hundred of our leaders together in San Diego. And this was actually on the agenda. And we actually talked about trust. And the first thing I had to do, and we actually brought in a speaker who is an expert in trust and building, relationships. But the first thing I had to do as the CEO was acknowledge that trust has been broken. And even for a 95-year-old, deeply respected, high values organization, we broke trust during this period. And we did it to survive. I think people intellectually understand that we had to do it. But we did things that our employees weren't used to seeing us do. We did things that our customers weren't used to seeing us do. Now, we did it within that value, that set of values. And that was really important to rebuilding trust, is that, the company is being put in a position where we had to furlough 87% of our workforce, but I paid healthcare for as long as I could. I paid a supplemental unemployment for as long as I could. Mostly, and the most important thing we did was we communicated with all of our furloughed employees every other week. We had a newsletter that went out to them because people were afraid and they didn't know. And honestly, we didn't know. And I was pretty honest about it. I'd say, look, we were hoping this would be a 3 to 6 month problem. It looks like it's going to be a 2-year problem. And here's what we're doing. And here's what's going on. And people deserve to know that. They deserved that level of respect. And so we did that. So I would argue within all of the hard decisions we made, we used the Freeman family values, and everything was kind of anchored left or right, but we stayed within that range. And it really set us up. By the way, the vast majority of our furloughed employees quit other jobs and came back to Freeman as the industry recovered. And but now we're really talking about the 8 pillars of trust, which is something David Horsinger speaks on. I don't know if you know David, but number 1 is clarity. Number 2 is compassion. Number 3 is character. Number 4 is competency. Number 5 is commitment. Number 6 is connection. Number 7 is contribution. And then number 8 is consistency. And that's why all of the things I just described, for example, during the pandemic were so important, because we had to provide clarity. We had to be consistent. We had to be, really of the utmost character in what we did. And I think we did that. And I think that's how we're focused on rebuilding trust, is we're saying, how are we going to do this? Because if we start with a bunch of excuses or reasons why it all had to happen, it's just kind of a waste of time. Let's just acknowledge it for what it is and then figure out how we go forward. And so that's what we're doing. And I think our customers and our employees really have shown up and worked with us through this whole period. So kind of awesome. It's kind of an awesome thing, to be honest, to see. I mean, it was, horrific. There were days I thought, oh my gosh, can I do this another day? And then I'm like, yeah, you have to, Bob. You got to pull yourself up and you got to do it. But I'm so glad we did. And we're in such a better place. But it was that deep set of values and trust that carried us through.
Well, that kind of goes back to your whole notion about, the heartbeat and the people.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, when I hear stories like this, I literally physically get chills, because, I'm just, a rabid proponent of authenticity in the leadership lexicon. You have to be authentic. And the fact that you were, saying just a moment ago, excuses weren't going to carry it. Excuses are just a way to camouflage and create, a dust cloud so that people can't see what's going on behind the sausage making effort here. So just kind of being that authentic in and of itself generates trust. And the folks that are longtime listeners to this show have heard me say this before. This was an old mentor of mine, a fellow by the name of Will Schutz, Dr. Will Schutz. People will connect through vulnerability. That's the only way that we actually get connection. Right. We connect through vulnerability. I believe that. I amended that a long time ago and said we disconnect through certainty. So when you try to position a facade of certainty, there's no place for people to connect. Yeah. And that idea of compassion, and I am familiar with those 8 pillars. The book, those of you that aren't watching this on the YouTube feed, you can't see me pointing, but over my right shoulder here, It's a book, Compassionate Capitalism. And I'll send you a copy of this, Bob. But
Thank
it's, it's all predicated on connection, maintaining connection.
Yeah.
And then the behavioral analog to connection is compassion. How do I care for? And it's not soft and fluffy. It's hard decisions.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I have to make hard decisions. We're going to have to furlough 85% of our people. That's a hard decision, but we're going to do it in a way that indicates we care. It's consistent with our value core.
Yeah. Well, our chair, Carrie Freeman Parsons, chair of our board, she's a longtime member of Conscious Capitalism, and she's on the board of Conscious Capitalism. And it's a pretty simple concept, which is you can do good and still do better. And I may be misquoting them, but that's how it is in my head. You can do good and still do better. I mean, so you can be a successful business and profitable. But the question is, are you focused on all stakeholders, or are you focused just on the shareholders? And I think the most successful businesses are focused on all of our stakeholders. So our customers, our employees, yes, the shareholders, but everybody who makes this business great. And I think that's why Freeman has had the longevity of 95 years. I mean, if you think about it, there are very few companies that are 95 years old in America. There are, I mean, handfuls. So it is
a handful. It's just a small handful.
Yeah.
Companies have a life cycle.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing I just think is sort of interesting is we had another speaker at our leadership. I had a great conference last week. It was so good to bring our leaders together. We hadn't done it in a couple of years because of the pandemic. The other thing that I think you would really appreciate is we had a speaker. His name is Ben Nimpkin, and Ben he's a young guy. He had a show on MTV called The Buried Life. And it really talks, he's written a book and he's a professional speaker, but it really talks about personal purpose. So I'm always trying to connect our people to the purpose of our clients, to the purpose of connecting people in meaningful ways, which is what we talk about at Freeman. We say we connect people in meaningful ways and we create moments that matter. That's our job. And I'm always coaching our people to say, hey, when you go to produce a show, don't think about, oh, I'm an AV tech, or I'm kicking out signage, or I'm writing a strategy, or I'm selling sponsorship. Think about, I'm helping doctors connect to solve these problems. I'm creating an environment where technologists can learn and create amazing things for our future. I'm creating an environment where we can have teachers like excel and be better teachers for our children. Like, that's our purpose. Our purpose is not to do things. It's to create an environment that actually moves the community that we're supporting forward. But I had never really thought about personal purpose in that way. And this is a hard business. So we work really hard in this business. We spend lots of days and nights on the road and in hotel rooms. It can be physically hard and intellectually hard. And we were dealing with burnout pre-pandemic. We were dealing with, people just, our best people, they just work harder and harder, and they're heroic in their actions. And I've been struggling with this for years. And as I mentioned, our chair, Carrie, she and I have been talking about, how do we get work-life balance? How do we get to that? How do we do it? It's so hard in this business. Clients call, you got to respond. But Ben really talked about work-life harmony, not balance, but harmony. And he really coached our team to say, hey, are both sides, these are my words, Ben does it better, but are both sides of the ledger full? Because the work side of the ledger has all kinds of accountability and commitments, and there's built-in structure. But on your personal life, do you have personal purpose? Do you know what motivates you and helps you think about your life beyond work? Do you have a bucket list? Not when you're 60 or 70 or 80, but do you have one when you're 20 or 30 or 40? And what goals are you putting against that bucket list? And who's holding you accountable? And are you creating an accountability structure? So that was actually my opening keynote at our leadership conference. And this gets back to building trust, because people were like, okay, wow. Again, they authentically understand that this is a problem for us, for all of us, especially with the mental health crisis we're experiencing. It is a real problem. And I think our people left really inspired. And again, I think it's another way to build trust because it's just honest. It's saying, hey, I know this is a problem. So how can we collaborate to solve it? And we'll keep bringing that. In fact, we are about to go on the road, the top leaders of the company, and be with all of our employees all over the world. And we do this, we're a family business, so we still believe in getting out there face to face and seeing our people. And we're going to talk about it with every employee in the company. We're going to talk about trust, and we're going to talk about personal purpose.
That's perfect. When you can bring these things together, and that has been a mantra of mine for years. Yeah. There's a number of studies that talk about, organizational, in the domain of employee engagement. Emotional engagement. Personal meaning has to be tapped into if you're going to have individuals in the company that are meaningfully engaged, emotionally engaged. So it's kind of like, what does working here make possible for me that I wouldn't get anywhere else? And it's that make possible for me. It's very specific. We're going to take a real quick break. I want to do a little bit more exploration on that. And I also want to bring Abraham Maslow into our conversation because there's a piece here that I think will be interesting. So folks, talking to Bob Priestek, CEO of Freeman, and we'll be right back after this short message. I want to thank you for listening. I want to also invite you right now to go to blainebartlett.com. And on that site, which is my personal website, you'll see services up on the top menu. I'd like you to click on Leadership Mastermind. Now, why I want you to do that is we have structured a mastermind program that is very unusual and it is very powerful. And by going onto that site and clicking that link, you'll be taken to a landing page that is an invitation to join this mastermind. It's a 52-week-long exploration of what it takes to be a highly effective leader in today's fast-changing environment. You won't regret it. And if you've been liking what you've been listening to on these Soul of Business podcasts, how does one become a leader that can keep connection to the soul of business? That's what we look at. That's what we're about in this mastermind program. So again, go to blainebartlett.com and click on the services link. And there you'll find the link to the Leadership Mastermind program. Look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for listening to this little commercial. And now back to our show. Welcome back. And just before we took the break, Bob had been talking about personal purpose and kind of the meshing of personal purpose with what the organization is actually doing. It's got its, organizations have got their goals and objectives. And the notion of burnout, I do a lot of work in the physician, space, healthcare space. And, obviously during the pandemic, the burnout is an issue. I do a lot of work in hospital systems around the country. And one of the things that I found around burnout is that burnout doesn't occur because people are working hard. Burnout begins to occur when people lose connection to meaning. What I'm doing is no longer meaningful in the way that it used to be. And that's, most organizations are toxic to the human spirit for that reason. They don't have an opening where, what I care about in my life gets addressed as I'm doing the work I'm doing for my company.
Right.
So, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What are some ways that you're going to be looking at, and this may be an invitation for the employees to, do a little bit of brainstorming around this too. How are you going to encourage that exploration of where's the intersection of personal purpose and organizational purpose? Where's that coming into play?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're having this debate right now. One of the things that we're looking at is how do we encourage people to dream? How do we encourage them to think beyond their current reality, to think about the limitations that they've created in their own self or that other people have created for them? And there's all kinds of really great things companies can do. We have employee assistance programs, we have unlimited PTO, which is a double-edged sword, but we do encourage people to take time off. we do employee appreciation days where we try to shut down as much of the system as we can. So we tend to do these, around 4th of July and Christmas to New Year's type times, because there's something to be said about everything coming together. But then we're also trying to say, and there's many other things we're doing, even business things that have kind of a secondary benefit. So one of the things that we put in place during the pandemic is we got much more disciplined about tracking our time and how we bill for things, because we had a different business model on our core business where we would get paid at the end. And we had to think differently about that because we didn't get paid by a lot of people. And but then I realized, oh, wow, this is also really helpful for enterprise resource planning. And now I can see when we're putting someone in a situation 10 months from now that they won't be able to fully survive. I mean, they will, they're heroic, they'll get through it. But so, there's all those things. But this notion of encouraging people to dream, giving permission to say, hey, and we saw some of this during the pandemic. People would, be at home, and their kids would come on the screen, and then they'd say, oh, I'm so sorry, or oh, my dog's barking. And I'd be like, it's awesome. Let me say hi to your daughter. Let me say hi, how old's your dog? It opened the window to our personal life in a very unique way. And I think we got to keep that up. I think we got to find ways to continue to do that and to dream big and encourage people. So we're building a new corporate headquarters in Dallas. Not what we would have built pre-pandemic, but we are moving into a new corporate headquarters. And one of the installations will be a dream wall. And I want people to go put things on the dream wall. And I'm going to look at how do we help each other as a community achieve those dreams? How do we do that? And we're going to find ways. So I think we have more work to do here. I can't tell you that we've kind of coded it just yet, but we're just starting with simple, and it is community driven. I actually hired a head of community this year. So somebody whose sole job is to think about community with a big C. So it could be customer communities, it can be employee. And I'm not trying to have her do marketing's job. It could be employee communities. I'm not trying to have her do HR's job. I'm trying to have someone think at a higher level, like how do we connect people internally and externally in meaningful ways that are purpose-driven, that really are supportive of one another? Because I think that's what communities do. And I hired this incredible woman. Her name is Sherry Huss. And Sherry created Maker Faire. So she was a co-founder of the Maker movement. And that is an entire community-based thing. And she's also, I'd worked with her in the past, created developer communities, had really done a lot of amazing things. But I think all companies are going to have to think this way because there's a lot of change that's still coming. It's not fully revealed itself.
Yeah. That dream wall, Carl Jung, and this is my butchering of something he said, but imagination lives at the threshold of the spirit. And if I can actually use imagination, I tap into that life force, the soul that is the heartbeat of living. And the dream wall. I love the dream wall. I'm assuming you're familiar with Bob Chapman. Barry Zinger.
I'm not sure. Tell me more.
Manufacturing company. Blue collar manufacturing company. They have a dream wall in their facilities, and I'm using that label because that's the one that you used here. But it's what are you aspiring to? Not from work, but what do you aspire to in your life? And they put this up, and people. It's as a community nexus point. It is unbelievably powerful to just kind of keep things moving and that sort of thing. And it's the keeping things moving that I now want to kind of transition into. So that's a butchered segue, but that's kind of where we're going.
No, it's good. It's all good.
You wrote something a little bit ago on one of your LinkedIn posts, and it's a quotation from Abraham Maslow, and I'm going to quote it here. One can choose to go back towards safety or forward towards growth. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again. And in the work I do with my clients, the idea of sustainable success will usually come up in some way, shape, or form. How can I crack the code so that I've got this perpetual motion machine that keeps me successful? And the way that I've come to play with this, or actually codify this, is there's no secret code, but there is this one thing that you need to pay attention to. Sustainable success is the process of developing the capacity to continuously start over.
Yeah.
And that notion of continuously starting over is really anathema to a lot of folks because, it's kind of like, start over. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, pandemic, I think, really marked that territory out in a very interesting way for most companies on the planet today. We've had to start over.
Yeah.
And there's an incredible gift in that.
Yeah.
So, you talked about you've changed some of your billing structures. You're now looking at things a little bit differently with your employees. What is, that whole hierarchy of needs when we start moving towards self-actualization?
Yeah.
How are you using that notion, that model, if you will, in your leadership with the organization?
Yeah. Such a great question. So I'm a Maslow junkie. So I love it. And there's a joke in our company that anytime a pyramid in any accidental form shows up, they're like, oh, there goes that Bob's, because he's got Maslow somehow connected to this. But I think it's really true that I think Abraham Maslow got it 100% right. If you apply the hierarchy of needs to any situation, it's completely there. You can't skip a step. You can't can't go from, food, water, shelter to self-actualization and not do all the things in between. It doesn't really work. And so I think as leaders, it's much of what I've talked about today. We have to actually meet people where they are, and we have to be honest. And if you're going to rebuild trust, if you're going to get people reconnected at a purpose level, you have to start with where they are. And we are all in different places, but the pandemic kind of level set us in a way. It kind of forced that issue for a lot of people. It created a common thread that ran through all of us. And so I've been really focused on trying to address that common thread. And I've been really focused on resilience, which is what I think you're describing when you talk about, the ability to get up and do it all again. And we hear a lot about corporate resilience. That's very popular in the boardroom. You'll have that discussion around corporate resilience. But I've been focused on more than that. I've been saying, how do we help our people build resilience? Because to my earlier point about the pressure stack and the amount of change that is happening and the rate of change, it's not that things haven't always changed. It's that they're changing so fast. I mean, think about the iPod. The iPod was created and shut off in a 20-year cycle. So it was, they don't sell an iPod anymore, but just 20 years ago, they launched an iPod. It changed the music industry. It changed the way we listen to music. It had younger generations have access to every genre of music, every decade of music. I mean, it's unbelievable, and it's over. It's no longer, it's obsolete. It's done. So I think people are going to have to learn to be more resilient, and I'm pretty honest about it. So I have the old joke. My kids would say it's a dad joke, but I have the old joke. If you hate change, you're really going to hate extinction, because it's true. And so we have to get comfortable. We have to get comfortable that things are going to change. So to do that, we have to build up people's resilience. It's why trust is so important. It's why corporations have a new responsibility. And we just updated our values. So we have very strong values, as I mentioned. We have integrity, enthusiasm, empathy, innovation, but we added a new value this year called learning mindset. And we want our people to have a learning mindset, because we are in an environment that will probably never be as stable as it once was, and as maybe as predictable as we would all like. And so to me, that's all driven by an understanding of Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. So anyway, that's what we're doing.
I love it. Folks, we've been listening to Bob Priestheck, CEO and member of the board of Freeman, one of the premier event companies on the planet today. And Bob, I can't thank you enough. This has been a fascinating conversation. I mean, I literally could continue this for another probably day. It's great material. I love talking to folks like you that are doing things on the ground to make a difference in the way that the business is actually experienced. It's not about the money, it's about the experience that people have. Do they feel good about themselves when in the presence of the work?
Yeah.
And that's it. Moments that make a difference. And Yeah, I love hearing what you're up to with this. So again, I want to thank you for the time and also for the insight.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all you're doing, helping leaders from all different types of companies find the soul of their business and build better. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Folks, you've been listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. Check out my website, blainebartlett.com. There's a bunch of material up there. Most of my IP, if you're a frequent listener, know that most of my IP is available basically for free. Just go up and pull something down, and then let's have a conversation about how you can use it. And we'll catch you on the next episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. In the meantime, as you go out today and live your life, be conscious of becoming a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. And we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.